ከጥላት ጋር የሚደባለቅ ጥላት ሲመጣ እንደንፈርሶ ቁጭ ብሎ ቆየው 30 አጉርሶ በ30ም 30 ገሎ ገባበት ውጅም ጓንጫ ወድሮ አረካጅሬ የጠባው ጥጃ አንዱን በጥፊ አንዱን በርግጫ ሩበላተ እኛ እንግሊዞች እኛ ጣሊያኖች የቸገራቸው በጎንደር ቢሉ ማን ሊፈራቸው መይሳው አስሮ መድፋ ሰራቸው መድፎም ይገኛል ዳፋት ያለው ደብረ ታቦር ላይ ዳፋት ያለው ያነ መድፋቸው ለውርደታቸው ምስክር ነው ሮበልዬ የዳጀቅ ናገር የዛ ሰውዬ ፍረጅን አልቢን ያሰኛል ወዬ ሮበላት መላው ጠፍታቸው ሲደናገሩ ለተንኮላቸው ጎጀን ይዳሉ ጎጃም ሽፈራው በላይ ሽፈራው ተቀበላቸው እየቆረጡ አባይ ጣላቸው አራይሰማ ሮበላት ያውታቸው ሲደናገሩ ለተንኮላቸው ሲደናገሩ ለምጠታቸው ወሎ እንዲዳሉ ወሎስ ቢሄዱ ንጉሥ ሚካኤል ተቀበላቸው አጼ ምኒልክ የአድዋው ጀግና ከጣይቱ ጋር ጠላት የመታ ስሙ ይነሳል በሁሉም ቦታ ማለት
ሀገራችን ኢትዮጵያ ሰላም ያገኘን ህዝቧን ከችግር ከመከራ ከሰቆቃ ያድነልን የቀደመ ፍቅራችንን አንድነታችንን ይመልስልን እየመጣ አስቸጋሪ ሁኔታ መስሎ ይመልስልን ኬን እናመሰግናለን ሀገራችንን እናስብ ኢትዮጵያን ስላደረግን እጅግ እናመሰግናለን ኢትዮጵያ ትንሿን ኢትዮጵያ ያየሁት እዚህ ቤት እግዚአብሔር የበለጠው በረከት ያድልን በጣም እናመሰግናለን እግዚአብሔር ሆይ በቸርነት እናመሰግናለን አባታችን
ሰላም ብያለሁ አልዘጋውም ድንበሬን ጠብቂልኝ
እኛ ሴቶች ብቻ አንችለው ጀመር አይዞህ ለራስ
ወንድሞቼ መሀል ስለሆንኩ አየሽ አላስ አይፎን ብሩኬ አይፎን ቻርጀር አለ እግዚአብሔር ይመስገን እንደምቆም አይጨሻለሁ ደሱን በላለሁ እኔ በሰው ምን ነው አዜ
ልቤ እንዴት ዝቅ እንዳደረገው ታውቃለህ? አባባሽ ደስ ይላል እንዲያጋጣሚ ሲፈጠሩ ደግሞ ሞልስ ናንጣው ለዚህ ጋር ያልተበቀ ነገር ደግሞ እዚህ ነው ብሩኬ ሌላው አርቲስት ማን እንደሆነ ታውቃለህ? አሁን በቀደም ዕለት ጉዴን ያወቁት አንድ ገጣሚ አርፎ ነበር የዛሬ 2 ዓመት ምስሉን ሰርቶ ሰጠ ያለው ሄኖክ አሜዚንግ ማወቅ አለ አወቀው ጸጉሩን ቆጣ ቢራ ነው ቢራ ይሻለኛል አለ አንታውስ አይ ይልኝ ሰላም ነሽ ወይ? ወርም ሳሳደረቻ
Сейчас
አነት ነው ግን
አሁን ነው የማይናገረው ማለት ነው። አሁን ነው ዝም ብለህ አለ አረ ቢላሂ ያዘስ ይሞራ በሳይብራስ ወርደው ታብዳር ያሙኩ ሉስ ሰው ስለሌለበት ሞርዶ
አሁን እዚህ ጋር የምትለው ለማለት ይከብደኛል።
እዚህ ጋር የሆነ ሰው እያጣላሽ ነው እንዴ?
I'm enjoying it.
አሁን ይከረበት የለም ይከረበት አየሩ ይከረበት እሱ ከረዋል ወጥቷል በደረቅ በደረቅ አስዋል ከሆነ ሰዓት በኋላ ከረበት የሰማሽ ነው ታው ከደም ዳጉጂ ባትሩ ተሳካላ ሰረገ ሞት ነው የተመከረ አንተ ልጅ እኮ ሆነ
የምታስቀምጠው ሰው አላት ተንጠርጥሬ ነው ከዛ መሀል አንተ ወንድሞቻችን ጋር ከናፈቁን ጋር እንድንገናኝ ስላደረግ በአንተና በቤተሰቦች ያለን ክብርና ፍቅር ልንገልጽ እንወዳለን። እጅግ አድርጌ ነው ከልቤ የማመሰግናችሁ። እግዚአብሔር ኢትዮጵያን ይባርክ፣ እግዚአብሔር ሕዝቡን ይሰብስብ። እናንተንም ሁላችሁንም በተለያዩ ዓለማት ያላችሁትን ሁሉ ወደ ሀገራችሁ በበረከት በሙላት እንድትመለሱ እግዚአብሔር ፈቃድ ይሁን። እጅግ አድርጌ አመሰግናለሁ። እንግዲህ በእግዚአብሔር ኬሮ ይሁን ባይተዋርነት እንዳይሰማን ካረጉን ሰዎች መካከል የመጀመሪያው ብሩክ ነው። ዛሬ ቤቱ ስለጋበዘን ሳይሆን ወደዚህ መምጣታችንን ከሰማ ጀምሮ ሳያቀን እኔ ያለውን ጎደላችሁ ምን ላስተካክል ብሎ ፕሮግራሙን አብሮን ተጨንቆ ነበርና እኔ እሱ እንዳለ አጠገባችን ሳውቅ መልኩን ሳላቀው ልቤ አርፎ ነበርና አመኘው ነበር። አላቀውም ግን በፌስቡክ ነው ያወራነው። ግን አመኘው ነበር። ተረጋግቻለሁ። ካሜራ ሰው አለን ምናስ በቃ ችግር የለም ብላት ነበር። ምስራቅ ልክ የሚያውቀው ሰው እንዳስቀመጠና ትኬትም ማስታወቂያ ምናምን እያገዘን ነው ብዬ ልቤ ሙልት ብሏልና ሰው ሀገር በጣም እንደዚህ ባለ ሰው ሀገር መታችሁ እንደዚህ አይነት ሰው ማለት በጣም የምር መታደል ነው። ቀድሜም ነግሬዋለሁ። አሁን ሰው ስለተሰበሰበ ሳይሆን ቀድሜም ነግሬዋለሁና እግዚአብሔር መልካምነትን የዘላለም ሀብት ያደርግልን። አሜን አሜን። ከዚህ በላይ የምታስበው ነገር በሙሉ እግዚአብሔር ፈጽምልን። አሜን። ደግ እንደሆንክ ቀና እንደሆንክ የልክበት ሁሉ ቀናና ደግነት የተሞላ ሰው ይግጠምህ። አሜን። ከምታስበው በላይና አንተ ውስጥ ካለው በላይ እግዚአብሔር ያሻግር መንገድ ይሁን። ለእኛ ደግሞ እንደዚህ አክብሮት እንደሰጠህን ያለህን እንደሰጠህን ሙሉ እንደሰጠህን ቤትህን በበረከት ይሙላልን። አሜን አሜን። ለኢትዮጵያ ያው በጦቢያ ስም እንግዲህ ያው ጦቢያ ደግሞ እዚህ ጋር እየቀረስክልኝ ነው ነገር
ታረዙ ማርገኝ ነገር አልበሰው አርባሽ
በነገራችሁ ላይ የልጄ ስም አቤም ይባላል እና ይህን ታሪክ ልንገራችሁ ሳላስበው ነው ያረገዝኩትና ለእሷ ነገርኳት። አይ እንደው አረገዝኩ እና ሲወለድ የምሬን ነው ለምስራቅ ከዛ ስወልድ እዚህ ነበርኩና ለገጣሚ ጓደኞቼ ሁሉ መልእክት ላኩ። ወንድ ልጅ ወልጃለሁ አሪፍ ስም አውጡልኝ፣ እኔ ሰው ሀገር ሆኜ ስም አልመርጥም ስላቸው ሁሉ ስም ላኩልኝ እና እሷ የጀርባ ታሪኩን ስለምታይ ጓደኛ ያግጣማችሁ አዋራጅ አቤም በይው አለችኝ። ምንድን ነው ያልኩት? በአማርኛ፣ በኦሮምኛ፣ በሲዳምኛ፣ በጉራግኛ ብቻ የኢትዮጵያ ቋንቋ የሆነ በሆነ ነገር ስም አውጡልኝ ጥሩ ስም ስለሷ እንግዲህ ድንገት አይደል የወለድሽው ይሄ እግዚአብሔር ስጦታ ነው አለችና አቤም አለችው። በጉራግኛ ነው አቤም ማለት እግዚአብሔር ሰጠኝ። ለእናንተ ማወጣለሁ ክሪስ ክሮስ ምናምን ከማለት ይሰውራል። ከማለት የሚሰውር ሰው አለ ለማለት ነው። ስራ ተገኝቶልኛል።
አዲስ ፕሮፋይል አለሽ
እንደ ትልቅ ሰው ብሎ ይሰማል።
ሶስት ነው ብርጋ እሳቸው ወገኛ ናቸው። እሳቸውን የሚተኩ ናቸው።
በእውነት ብሩክ ደግነት ዝም ብሎ አይደለም፣ አስተዳደግ ያስፈልገዋል። ደግ ለመሆን ስለፈለክ ብቻ ደግ ልትሆን አትችልም። ከውስጥህ የሚመጣ ደግነት ራሱ አንተ ሳትወድ በግድ ይናገራል እና ክፉ ለራሱ ደግ ለራሱ ነው የሚባለው እና ምሰራቸው ደግ ነገሮች በሙሉ ስንቁ ነው ሆነው እድሜ ልክ የሚከተሉ ፈለክም አልፈለክም እና ከምትሰራቸው ነገሮች በሙሉ አንደኛ እኔ በተለያዩ ቤቶች እሄዳለሁ። ኢትዮጵያዊነትን እንደዚህ አግዝፈው ለማሳየት መሞከር ሰዎች ከኢትዮጵያ ወጥተናል ይላሉ፣ ግን ኢትዮጵያን በእነሱ አምሳል ፈጥረዋት በመኖሪያ ቤታቸው በመኝታ ቤታቸው የሚያደርጓቸው ነገሮችን በማስብበት ወቅት አንዳንድ ጊዜ ተስፋ እቆርጥ የነበረበት ደረጃ ላይ ደርስና ለካ እነዚህ ኢትዮጵያኖች አሉ ልና ከሄድኩበት ዓለም ተመልሼ ስለ ኢትዮጵያ የሚቆረቆሩ የሚያስቡ እነዚህ ደጋግ ፍጥረቶች መኖራቸውን ሳስብ አገሬ አለች፣ አገሬ አትፈርስም፣ ኢትዮጵያ ትቀጥላለች እላለሁኝ እና እነዚህን እህቶቻችን ደግሞ ስታዋቸው ቀጫጭን ምንም ጉልበት አቅም የሌላቸው ግን በጣም በሳል የሆነ ስለት የሆነ ብዕር ያላቸው ጥሩ አቅም ያላቸው እና ምናልባት ይህን የሚቀጥለውን ትውልድ ሊሞርዱት ይችላሉ፣ ኢትዮጵያዊ አድርገው ሊሰሩት ይችላሉ፣ ሊፈጥሩት ይችላሉ የሚል ተስፋ ስላለኝ በትውልድ ቀረጻው ውስጥ የእነሱ ሚና ምን ሊሆን እንደሚችል ከዚሁ ከወዲሁ አስበዋለሁ። እህቶቼ ብዕራችሁ አይጠፍ፣ ለተቀበሏችሁ፣ ላሞገሷችሁ፣ ለወደዷችሁ በእናንተ ስራ ክብር ለሰጧችሁ ሁሉ ቤትም ቦታ ላይ እግዚአብሔር በበረከት ብሩኬ ቤትንም ይሙላ። እንዲሁ ደግሞ አንተም ቤተሰብ መስጠት የኢትዮጵያ ምልክት ሆነህ ካለባበስህ፣ ካነጋገርህ፣ ከእንግዳ አቀባበልህ ጭምር ያረካህን ወንድማችን ስለሆንክ በእውነት በመላው እዚህ በዩናይትድ ኪንግደም በሚገኝ ኢትዮጵያዊ ስም ጭምር ታላቅ የሆነ አክብሮቴን ገልጽልሃለሁኝ። እግዚአብሔር እንግዲህ ይህን ቤት በበረከት ሙላው። አመሰግናለሁኝ።
Okay.
እግዚአብሔር ወልዶ ፈቅዶ እናንተ እዚህ መጣችሁ ይሄ ፕሮግራም ተዘጋጅቶ ስላለፈ በጣም ደስ ብሎኛል። አክብራችሁኝም ደግሞ ጥሬን አክብራችሁ ቤቴ ድረስ ስለመጣችሁለት ከልብ አመሰግናለሁ ሁላችሁንም። ያው በእናንተ በቂ ባይሆንም ይመስለኛል ሀገር ስትመለሺ ብርድ ነውና ቲጂም ስለምታደርጊው ነገር ሁሉ እግዚአብሔር
እንግዲህ እዚህ ሀገር ከመጣሁ የመጀመሪያው የራስ ጥሬ ነው እንድታውቁ።
ያው እንግዲህ ለዶክተር በእንትን ይደርሳል። ሌላው ደግሞ ልዩ ደግሞ እዚህ ሀገር አብሮን እየኖረ በብዙ ነገር ሲሰራ ያለግፍ ነው ሰሪ በጣም ለት በምትሰራው ነገር ኮርተንብሃል፣ እንወዳለን፣ እናከብርሃለን። ከምስሬ እጅ እንግዲህ ምስሬ ታለብሽ
በዚህ ሀገር ላይ ትንሽ ነገር ማለት ፈልጋለሁ። ቀላል ነገር አይደለም። ሀገራችን ብዙ ሰው ያስፈልጋታል እንዳንተ አይነት ያለ ሰው እና አሁን የተሰጠው ውሳኔ እንዳለ ሆኖ ነገር ግን በፈቃደኝነት እንኳን እስከዛሬ ያረከውና ለሰው ተስፋ መቀጠል ቀላል ነገር አይደለምና ይሄን ነገር በሚወዱ ይሄን ነገር በሚያከብሩ ይሄ ለዚህ ነገር ክብር በሚሰጡ ሰዎች ስም ላመሰግን እወዳለሁ። ያው አንተ ክፈል
የዶክተር እንደው መስጠት
ጋቢያችሁን ለብሳችሁ ትነሳላችሁ። እኔ በእውነት እጅግ ሳላውቀው ግን በኋላ አውቄው በጣም ከተደነቁባቸው ኢትዮጵያ ውስጥ አንድ ኢትዮጵያውያኖች ውስጥ አንዱ ነው። እዚህ ሀገር እንግዲህ ወደ 29 ዓመት ነው የቆየሁት። በዚህ ውስጥ ሰዎች ለቁም ነገር በተለይ የወገንን የተሰበረን አጥንት መጠገን ቀላል ነገር አይደለም እና ስለ ደግሞ ሳይሰስት ፍቅሩን ታውት እንደሆነ ትህትና ትልቅ ነገር ነው። እኔ እንደዚህ አይነት ነገሮች የታደልኩ አይደለሁም በጣም ግን እንደዚህ አይነት ትህትና ብቃት ያለው የሰዎችን የወደቁ ሰዎችን አንስቶ እግር ሰጥቶ ማራመድ መቻል ማንቀሳቀስ መቻል ከተሳቀቁበት አንገታቸውን ከደፉበት ቀና እንዲሉ ማድረግ ቀላል ነገር አይደለም እና ሰሌ ሲያንስ ነው። ግን ይሄ ሁሉ የኢትዮጵያኖች ፍቅር ለምሰራቸው ስራዎች ምልክት እንዲሆኑ ጉልበት እንዲሆኑ የሚያደርግ ነው እንጂ ተቀመ በሚለው ሳይሆን በሚታወቀው በስደት ዓለም መመሰጋገንና መከባበር አይደለም ያለው። ብዙዎቻችን ይሄ ፖለቲካው ምኑም እየገባ ከዚያ ጋር በመናረጋቸው ትንቅንቆች ብዙ ሺህ ጠላት ብዙ ሺህ ወዳጅ የሀገራችን ልጆችን በሙሉ አጥተናል። ስለዚህ አንተ ደግሞ በበጎ አድራጎት የተሰማራባቸው ነገሮች በሙሉ ጥሩ ምሳሌ ነው። ሞዴል ነህ፣ ጥሩ ሞዴል ነህ ለሌሎቹ እንደዚህ አይነት ሙያ ያላቸው እና ታንቀሳቀሳለና ጥሩ ሞተር ነው የሚሆነውና ሰሌ በእውነት ለምታደርገው ነገር እኔም ታላቅ አክብሮቴን ልገልጽ እወዳለሁ። ምንም እንኳን ልሸልም ባልችል
ጋሽ አለብኝም ያው በኢትዮጵያዊነት ነገር የሚያደርገውን ነገር በደንብ በትንሹ ቢሆን አውቃለሁ እና ያው እግዚአብሔር በሚያውቀው እንግዲህ ይችላል አዘጋጅ
ሜዳሊያውን በስመ ያው ምን ይልክ
ኦቢኢ ምናምን አያስፈልግም።
ባምባሊ ላይ ነው
ጣይቱም አለ
በጀርባ ጣይቱም
አለች። የሚገርማችሁ ነገር
ካሜራ ነሽ
ተሸላሚዎች እናንተ ገቡና ለሁለት እንድቆም ይቁን
በጦቢያ ስም እንግዲህ
እጅግ አድርገን እናመሰግናለን። ጦቢያ ይላል ጽሁፉ።
ይህንማ ጽፈሽ የሚቀጥለው ወር
ጦቢያ ይላል።
ስምስሪ
እግዚአብሔር ይስጥልን። በደንብ እያነሳልኝ ነው።
በወግ መሰረት የሚቀጥለው ወር ዲስኩርስ ነው። እኔ ደግሞ ስለ ነብሮች ልናገርና ታሳሽ ብላ በቃ እዚህ ሲመጡ ታዩዋቸው ስለዚህ ሀገር ሲመጡ ማለት ነው አይደለም ያሳለ ሰዋለ ኦሺ ያለ ሰበሰባቸውና እነዚህ ልጆች መጠቀም ይቻላል እና ሻርፕ የተሳሉ የተሻሉ ሻርፕ የሆኑ ልጆች መሆን ይቻላል። የአቋም ሰው መሆን ይቻላል። ምክንያቱም ብዙ ሰው ሊመጣና እንዴት ስለተገባ አቅጣጫ ከዛም በኋላ ምንድን ነው ሀሳብ የነበረው ቲፒካል የቤተ ክህነት ትምህርት ይዘው ጎን ለጎን አካደሚክ ላይ ዩኒቨርሲቲ ገብተው ምናምን ነገር ማየት አለ። ከኛ በፊት የነበሩት ሰዎች እኛን አላሳዩ መንገዱን ስላላሳዩ ብዙ የተበላሹ ልጆች ነበሩ። ስለነበረ ነው እንጂ ብዙ የተበላሹ ልጆች ነበሩ። መማር አለባቸው ማወቅ የሰብሰብ 15 ናቸው። አንድ ቤተ ክህነት ሰው ነበሩ። እሳቸው ጋር ወስድኳቸው ያንን ስለምግባር እዚህ ጋር ደግሞ አካዳሚክ ትምህርት መማር አለባቸው። ኮሲያቸው ብቻ የሆነ ነገር ለማለት ነው። ያ መሰረት ይመስለኛል። እንዳለ አጋጣሚ ነገር አለ። አራት እዚህ አሉ ለምስክርነት ደግሞ አራት ሰው ካለ በቂ እና እንደዚህ እንደ ልጆች የሳያቸው ነው። ምክንያቱም እዚህ ሀገር በጣም ከባድ ላይፍ አንዴ ከሸወደሽ አትመለሽም። ለምን ሲስተም በጣም ከባድ እና ጥሩ ስነ ምግባር ያላቸው ልጆች ናቸው። ተማሪ ነው። እሳቸው ደግሞ ያው የራስ ጎበና ናቸው። አግሬሲቭ ስትሪክት ነው ላይፍ ላይ እና
አትረፋሃል
አያቸው። አይ ያው ሰለሞን አያውቀንም ይላሉ ግን ያውቃቸው እና በጣም ደስ ያለኝ በጣም ደስ ያለኝ
ምን እንደታያችሁ አላውቅም። ዛሬ እና ይህን ሽልማት ሲሸለም ሽልማት መለዋወጥ ከተቻለ ምስራቅ ይህንን ነገር ስትሸልሙኝ የገረመኝ ነገር ያው ምስራቅ ትንሽ ኢንፎርሜሽን አላት እና የአድዋ ዘማች የሆኑ ልጆች ሁሉ ጊዜ በቃ እንደምታዩት በጭፈራ ብቻ ነው እና ጎራዴና ጋሻ ይዞ ምኒልክ አደባባይ መዞር ብቻ ነው አድዋ መስሎ የሚታያቸው እና የአድዋ ታሪክ ግን ሌላ ትርጉም ያለው እና በተለይም የአፍሪካ አንጸባራቂ ኮከብ የሚባሉት እኒህ የጥቁር ሱናሚ መሪ ዝም ብለው ተውጠው መቅረት የለባቸውም በሚል በየክፍላት ሀገሩ ያሉ አድዋን የሚያዘጋጁ ልጆች 10 ልጆችን መርጠን እነዚያ
ደኑና አራዳማን ማነው አራዳኛው አገሬ ኢትዮጵያ ኩሪ ይገባሻል ሀገሬ ኢትዮጵያ ኩሪ ይገባሻል የማያስደፍሩ ጀግና ልጅ ወልደሻል
እና ባለፈው ወደ 200 የሚሆኑ ልጆች ጦቢያ ዝግጅት ላይ እንዲጋበዙ ትኬት የተገዛላቸው
በእነሱ አማካኝነት የተገዛላቸው ማለት ነው።
እና የዚህ የዓለም አቀፉ ኢትዮጵያ ዲያስፖራ ነበር እንትን የምናደርግ የነበረውና የምናስተባብራቸው። ስለዚህ ልጆቹ በጣም ተበራክተው በትልቅ ሁኔታ እየተጠናከሩ እየሰሩበት ያለ ነው። አሁን ህጋዊ ሰነድ አቋቁመው ለማስመዝገብ እየተዘጋጁ ነው እና ይሄን የምኒልክን እልፍኝ በተመለከተ ሲሸጥ እሱ ነገር ትዝ ብሎኝ እንዴት ተገናኘ? መቼም ሰው በሀሳብ የተራራቀ ይመስልሻል፣ ግን ልብ ለልብ ተገናኝተዋልና እግዚአብሔር የምኒልክ አምላክ ደግሞ በበረከት ጨምሮ ይስጥልኝ። ለዚህ ቤት የሚሆኑ መታሰቢያዎች እንግዲህ አስብና አንተ ቤት መተቀበለኝ በረከትን እልካለሁ። በጣም ያስደስታል።
ጋሻለ ጦርና ጎራዴ ነው የሚቀረው።
ቦታው ትክክለኛ ቦታ ነው። ትንሽ ለመጨመር ያልፈልግ በጣም እዚህ ሆነው ውጭ ሆነው ነገር ግን ልባቸው ሀገር ውስጥ ናቸው። ሁላችሁ ብዙዎቻችሁ ናችሁ። የእነሱም ግሩፕ እንደዛ ነው እያደረገ ያለው እና እዛ ሆነው እዛ ያሉት ወጣቶች ስለ ሀገራችን በረታ ስለ ኢትዮጵያ እንድንበረታ በአንድነት ተሰልፈን ነው የሚመክሩን ታላላቅ እና እኛ ኢትዮጵያ ማዘጋጅተን ነበር ባለፈው ያሉን ክብረ በዓል ስናከብር ለማበረታታት ብለው ወደ 200 ትኬት ያደረጉና ሰዎች በነፃ የሚገቡ ይህ ማለት የራሳችንን ነገር እናዋጣ ማለት ነው። ይሄ ያደረጉት እጅግ አድርገን ነው። በዚህ አጋጣሚ እናመሰግናለን። እንወዳለን። ደግፎናል። ኢትዮጵያን ስንል ያው ብዙ ችግሮች ሊኖሩ ይችላሉ። ነገር ግን ደግሞ የሚደግፉ ጠጠሮች ብዙ አሉ። በተለያዩ ዓለማት ያሉ ሰዎች አሉና በዛ ሰዓት ደግሞ እንደውም እኛ ፕሮግራሙን ለማቋረጡ ላይ ያሰብን ነበርና በብዙ ችግሮች ምክንያት የእነሱ አለሁ ማለት አይዟችሁ ማለት ፕሮግራም እንድናዘጋጅ ረድቶናል። እጅግ አድርገን እናመሰግናለን። ቦታውን በጣም እና ቦታውን ያገኘው ትክክለኛ ቦታውን ያገኘው በዚህ አጋጣሚ ግን አንደኛ እግዚአብሔር ይስጣችሁ፣ እግዚአብሔር ያበርታችሁ። በቃ አብራችሁ አግዙ። ያው ለዛችሁ እነሱ ሊያርኩት አተማ ምን ተታገዝለት ያው
እንደ ብሩክስተናገር ዝም ብሎ ነው
ያው ብሩክ አክልበት ታላቅ ስለሆንኩ
ከመጀመሪያ ቀደም ብያለሁ። አክብራችሁ ስለመጣችሁ በእውነት ከልብ አመሰግናለሁ። ይህም ቤት ደግሞ እንደዚህ ለመስራት ሳስብ ቤት አድዋ ብዬ ነው ለመስራት ያሰብኩት እና ብዙ የማስባቸው ሀሳቦች አሉ። ይህንን እዚህ ለማድረስ ደግሞ እንዳለ እዚህ የሚገኙ ጓደኞቼ አብዛኞቹ ደግፈውኛል። በሀሳብም በአቅም ነው ሁሉም ነገር ደግፈውኛል እና እግዚአብሔር ያክብርልኝ። ወደፊት ደግሞ ከዚህ የበለጠ ትልቅ ነገር ሰርቼ ከእነሱ ጋርም ደግሞ በመወራት አሪፍ ነገር ሰርቼ ከእነ ምስሌ ጋር የተለየ ነገር ይሆናል። ሀገራችን ኢትዮጵያ እግዚአብሔር ይጠብቅልን። አይቀርም
ሽማግሌ ለመሆን ያብቃል።
መለስ ብያለሁ። ስለዚህ ችሏል። ቢራንጣለኝ ከምርቃቱ በኋላ ቢራንጣለኝ ቡናው ላይ ደግሞ ምርቃት ትገርሚያለሽ። ከምርቃት በኋላ ትቀይሪያለሽ። ተቀየርሽ ወደ ቢራ ተቀየርሽ። ቢራ ባዶ አለ በጣም ያለ ስፕራይት በዓሉ ግርማን ኦሮማይ ይሻላል ያነበበ ሰው አለ ኦሮማይ እና እኔ በጣም ሕፃን ልጅ ሆኜ ነው ያነበብኩትና በጣም ደጋግሜ ያነበው ነበር። በተለይ ደግሞ የኢትዮጵያን ደብዳቤ በቃሌ ወጥቼው ነበርና እሷ ገጸ ባህሪ ምን ትመስለኛለች መሰለኝ የሆነ ሰው የቀረጸ ሳይሆን ልክ እንደዚህ ማቃት ሰው ነው የምትመስለኝ። የምሬን ነው እንዲህ ማቃት ሰው የለካዋት ድሮዋንም ማቃት መስለኝ ነበርና እሷ ጊዜ ዝላችሁ ሆነ ከጸጋዬ ጋር ስትወጣ ቢራ በስፕራይት ትጠጣለች። ለህፃንነቴ ውስጥ ሳድግ ቢራ በስፕራይት ነው አይገርማም አልኩኝ። ከፍ ስል ኦፖርቹኒቲውን ሳገኝ መጀመሪያ እሱን ነው የሞከርኩት። ከዛ ጣሙን ወደድኩት ቀረው። ቢራ የሚባል አልጠጣም ከጠጣም በስፕራይት
ነፍጠኛ ብለሽ የገጠምሽላቸው ለእነሱ ነው። ትረስት ሚ ትናንትና ገጠመችው አመለጠ። አንተ ሄደ ነበር አብሮች
ወይ ጣጣ እና
አለው እኮ ችግር የለም
አደረጃጀት
አለው
ይበረከታታል ማለት ነው።
ትርጉሙን ነው ምን እንደሆነ እሱን ግጥም እኮ መስለኝ ምን መሰለሽ ትዝ ይላችኋል ምንም አይበላም መልሳ ቢሳ በቲቪ ቀርቦ እዚህ ነፍጠኛን በሰበርንበት አደባባይ ያለ ንግግር አረገ። እኛ ነፍጠኛን ሰብረን በዚህ አደባባይ የሚል ንግግር አረገና ይህ ሰውዬ ነፍጠኛ ቀም እንዲያሉ አሁን እሱ ሊል የፈለገው አማራ ነው። በእርግጥ ግን እኔ ነፍጠኛ እንደዛ አላውቅም። ነፍጠኛ ነፍጥ አንግቦ በረሃ ገብቶ ለኢትዮጵያ ነፃነት የሚዋደቅ እምቢኝ የሚል ጀግና ነው። ኦሮሞውን ሲዳማውን ምናምን አይ ይሄን አገዛዝ ብለን ጫካ ከገባን ነፍጥ አነገተ ነፈጠ ይባላል። እኔም ማውቃት ትርጉም እሱ ደግሞ በማያውቀው ቋንቋ በሚፈልገው ትርጉም ተረጎሙ እና የዛን ቀን ማታ ነው ብዬ ነፍጠኛ ታውቃለህ አታውቅም ልንገርህ ብዬ የጻፍኩትና በጣም ሰው ተናዶብኛል። ያው በተለይ ደግሞ ወዳጆች ተናደውብኛል።
ግን ትልቁ ነገር ምንድን ነው? እንደዚህ አይነት የድርሰት ያላቸውን ሰዎች የምታባቢበት ከራሳቸው ስሜት ጋር ካልታረቁ በስተቀር ገንዘብም ሀብትም የሚበግራቸው አለ።
አንተ ሁለቱን ናቸው በቃ ሌላ ማድረግ አልችልም። መመንዬ ላቀዋለች ሰዎች ይቀጥልለት የምችለው እውነቱን መናገር ታሪክ ነው ይቀመጣል። እኔ ኢትዮጵያ ሄጄ ሳነበው ዩቲዩብ ላይ ሲቀመጥ ማስበው ሁሉም ሰው ዛሬ ዛሬ 50 ዓመት ልጅ እኮ እንዲህ ብላ ነበር አሳሲት ሌላ
ሌላ ሰው ካለ አልጠጣም
ትናንትና ማለት ነው።
እሺ ብሩኬ እንዴት እንደሚቀርብ
በቀደም ማለት ነው። ገና 4 ሰዓት አልሞላውም። ኤዲተሮችሽ እንዴት እንደሚፈልጉ ይሄንን ራሴስ ቢጤ ነበር ለሰለሞን መጥቶ
የተባልከው ለካ አልሰማም አንተ ሄደህ በእኛ ሀገር ሰው ልጅ እንዲሆን ሲፈልግ ህፃን ልጅ አልጋው ላይ አስተኛው ይባላል። አስተኛው ደጋግሜ ነው ያስተኛሁት። የዛሬ አመት ልጠብቃ ልጠብቃ አልጋው ሚወድ እንደተሰማ ወይ የሚያውቀው ነገር አለ
መክፈቻዋን
እኔ ግን እዚህ ጋር ኮኮብ በማጣት በጣም ያልኩትን እኮ ልበላ አልሰማኝም። እንዴት ባንዲራዋ ላይ ኮኮብ የለም አንተው ወደዚህ ከላከው እኛ
I ይገባሻል ተውደኑና አራዳማን ማነው አራዳኛው ሀገር የኢትዮጵያ ኩሪ ይገባሻል የማያስደፍሩ ጀግና ልጅ ወልደሻል ደመን ወረደኔው ተውደኑና አራዳማን ማነው አንተ መንገደኛ ልጠይቅህ ወሬ ከአባቴ ባድማ ተጠምዷል ወይ በሬ መጠመዱንማ ተጠምዶ ነበረ ደመለኛው ወይፈን ማነቂያ ሰበረ ደመን ዘራፍ አካኪ ዘራፍ አገሬ ኢትዮጵያ ጥቁርም አይደለሽ ጥቁር ነሽ አሉ ነጭም አይደለሽ ነጭ ነሽ አሉ ዘራፍ አካኪ ዘራፍ ዱብ ያለው እንደ በረዶ በልጅነቱ በረሃ ወርዶ በረሃ ዳሪ በሰው ጠመንጃ ወንዝ አሻጋሪ
በቃ ነካ
ሴቶቹ አንድ ላይ ሆነው ግድግዳ ነው መያዝ ያለባችሁ እዛ ጋር የጣይቱ ዘመን ነው።
እንቀመጥ ተደረደር እንቀመጥ
ሰላም ቀና አይናችሁ እንዲሰራ ከኔ ጋር አንድ ጊዜ አሁን አቅርቤ ነው። ስለዚህ አደራችሁ እንዳጨፍሩ መንቢ ከኔ ጋር ነሽ?
አሁን ተነሱና ሁለታችሁ ተቀምጣችሁ ግባ ብሩኬ። ራስ አበበ አረጋይን ነው የሚመስሉት እኮ እሳቸው
በልጅነታቸው ሰላም ያለው
ፋንታስቲክ ታንክ ዩ አንዴ
ብሩኬ ገባ
ደግሞ ዋነኛው ሰው ነው።
በጣም
እዚህ ጋር በጣም ተነስና ማለት ነው ብሩክ እንደዚህ ቀረብ
እኔ ምንም
ኢንዴክስ ባትሪ እየቀየረ ኢንዴክስ
በነገራችን እኔ ለታንሺ ራሱ የለም እዚህ ምድር ላይ
በሳው
ደግሞ ሰውና ሰማዛጋ በሰው ስራ ተግቤታ
ምድር ላይ ነው ያልኩት አሁን እኮ ይተሰማኝ
ፕሪንት ታረጋታለህ
አሪፍ ነው ለኛ አሪፍ አይደለም የተባለው እቺን እንኳን
አይ በጣም
ካለ መቼስ ስፔሻል ቴዲያ
ተገናኙ ነው
And Masterwell is going to speak to us about how to craft a credible and inclusive implementation process for the national dialogue. Masterwell, thank you very much for joining us and for your time today. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Ahmed, and organizers for inviting me to take part in this very important conversation. I'm glad that I'm going last because many of the issues that I had prepared or wanted to emphasize have already been addressed. So I'm not going to repeat many of those. And I just want to start off before going to my topic of making sure the implementation process is credible and inclusive. I want to start off by clarifying my own views on two preliminary questions. The first question is Dr. Samir's point, which was, does Ethiopia need a national dialogue at this moment? My answer to that question is a definite yes. And the second one is, does the national dialogue as envisaged currently in its current form hold meaningful promise for Ethiopia? My answer to that question is a definite no. And I just wanted to put these premises first before I proceed with my presentation, which will focus on a different question, which is maybe something that Goitom tried to address. What types of changes to the current form should we advocate for, should we implement before the national dialogue can proceed so that it can indeed bring about genuine progress in Ethiopia? So I want to highlight two different contexts that haven't been addressed. I think context is critical because national dialogue, the literature on national dialogue shows us that its success really depends on a variety of political, economic, and historic contexts. So we have to address these contexts first. And many of the speakers have already dropped a few important contexts. Two that I want to highlight, in addition to all that's been said, is that in Ethiopia, the state structure and the political history shows that incumbents, autocratic governments, have a very established practice of weaponizing institutions, laws, democratic norms in order to implement their own political agenda. So this is a very established record. In 2018, when EPRDF technically accepted a transition and allowed for democratization, it acknowledged that in a way, and it admitted that it was weaponizing various democratic institutions and laws and processes like this type of process, even though it's not necessarily in its current form, to use it for its political ends. So that is a very critical context that should inform our understanding of whether we should be optimistic about this process, how much of trust can we put in it. So that's one context. And then the second one, something that the commissioners, Ambassador and Dr. Jonas brought up, is the question or the emphasis on indigenous knowledges and indigenous systems. The reference to elders and religion and some of these values, indigenous values that Ethiopia has and can and should appropriately, obviously, be proud of and implement in these processes. We need to be wary of that rhetoric as well, because again, we have a track record of governments abusing these institutions, either rhetorically or through basically manipulating these very respectable institutions and elders to drive their own political agenda. So I think these contexts are very critical when we look at what the national dialogue process looks like and how it's being basically implemented. So having said that, I want to say that, the literature on national dialogue shows us that it can take various forms and the timeline and nature could vary. But generally, I think Dr. Samir also pointed this out, there are distinct phases. There's the preparation, the consultation at grassroots level or with limited elites, and then the conferencing, which is more at the regional national conference level, and then the implementation of outcomes. So there are distinct phases. Now, in Ethiopia's case, where are we on the timeline? Dr. Jonas gave us some insights. He said that they're in the preparatory process. But in here, when I talk about preparation, I'm looking at the process that even came before the establishment of the national dialogue. So it appears, based on the structure that I outlined, we are on the second stage of the process, consultation. The Commission already told us that it's been conducting various consultations with different actors. So did we skip the first phase, the preparation, the process of actually setting up the Commission? Obviously, we didn't. The preparation was done, but it was done not in an inclusive manner. It was done primarily by the current government using the institutions that it dominates, the parliament and the executive. And as we know, this government is not inclusive. It's dominated by one political party. And in addition, the process it followed, some of the questions from the audience have brought up those issues, the drafting of the legal instrument that set up the Commission, the process of identifying what powers and mandates the Commission will have, who it's going to be accountable for. These are all critical issues, as well as the individuals which constitute the Commission. All of these preparatory processes were done in a process that's not inclusive. And they did not give opposition parties, civil society groups, and other stakeholders real meaningful opportunity to shape this preparation process. This is critical. And as a result, several opposition groups have outright rejected this initiative, boycotted it from the onset as some political theater that we're used to in Ethiopia. And for the same reason, there's not much public buy-in and engagement and enthusiasm about the process. So the very first prong of the process, the implementation process was neither inclusive nor credible. So while this is so, we are looking at the commission is marching forward with its activities and predetermined schedule, and we seem to find ourselves in the second phase of consultation. In terms of its importance, in my opinion, and the literature also supports this, the second phase, the consultation phase, is another critical juncture. It is where the core issues and the agendas for the dialogue will actually be identified, and the participants will also be identified. So if this step 2 is also not done in an inclusive and credible manner, it will basically preclude any success on the following 2 prongs, the conferencing and the implementation of outcomes, and it would totally down the whole initiative. So in my view, we are at this very important juncture, and a critical choice has to be made, both by the commission, the government, and also the public and other international actors who want to see this process actually bring about meaningful change. And the choice is either A, we shut our ears to the obvious defects that the stakeholders are voicing and just march forward with blind optimism that this would work. And this option would basically mean that the commission will set the agenda for the dialogue without the participation of various important stakeholders. And they will do that agenda setting in a process that's not credible. Or option B would be to heed the grievances of various stakeholders. And these have been, out there. These political groups have issued statements. The political parties council, the Joint Council of Political Parties has been publicly trying to get the public support on its grievances, essentially. So these are out there for the commission and the government. So option B would be to heed these grievances and allow the necessary time and space for these shortcomings to be addressed before moving to step 3. Now, I urge the commissioners in attendance today and also the other commissioners and the government to choose this latter option and either refuse to move forward with the process and the predetermined schedule until these major issues of inclusivity and credibility are addressed, or prioritize at least these issues as its first agenda for the commission. And this is maybe where I depart a little bit from Goitom, in the sense that I don't think we necessarily have to postpone the dialogue before we move forward, before we address these issues, but maybe the commission has this great opportunity of establishing its credibility and its ability to deliver on this promise that the Ethiopian people are putting on it by prioritizing these preliminary issues as its first agenda. And that means, a lot of these grievances can be addressed through legislative, perhaps, or other procedural mechanisms. I'm not going to go into all of them, but I'm going to throw around 2 examples of things that already other stakeholders have pointed out under each banner: inclusivity and credibility. On the inclusivity side, basic conditions for the national dialogue, and this is something that Dr. Samir and maybe Goitom also highlighted, have to be guaranteed. There has to be ceasefire so that basic security and peace is established in all parts of the country, so that not only at the grassroots level dialogue will be possible, but the stakeholders who purport to represent these people in different parts of the country can actually dialogue and take part in these discussions and consultations. So that's key. The end of the blockade of food in the Tigray region has to be prioritized. This is something that Goitom brought up, but the fact that this was not even brought up by the commissioners, I think is a bit puzzling to me, that there is a part of society in Ethiopia right now that is locked out of basic services, basic food, and humanitarian relief, not only for Tigray, for other parts of the country. People cannot engage in this type of participatory process without basic access, preliminary conditions, food, access to basic services are guaranteed. And then we can go on and on other things that could wait. But I think that these are really critical basic conditions. Now, the commission does not have power to implement this, but the commission has the ability. And if the people believe in the commission's credibility, the people's support to prioritize these issues and take it to the stakeholders and say these preconditions have to be met. Second, on inclusivity, the Commission should secure the legal and practical mechanisms whereby all these armed and non-armed groups that are not currently included or cannot take part because of legal impediments are included. How that would be, this is something that the lawyers can debate, but this is another priority, I think, for the Commission to establish mechanisms whereby groups that are labeled terrorists or destructive forces and therefore cannot, be part of legal processes can come forward and take part in the agenda setting part of the consultation. And then finally, on the credibility, again, many things can be done. But one thing that the political parties first recommended, opposition parties, and was never accepted as a recommendation, was that the Commission has to be accountable to an impartial body. The recommendation was that the Commission has to be accountable to the President's office, because the President, as the head of state, is impartial and is technically non-partisan. That was rejected, essentially. And that's a major grievance that the political parties council had. But if possible, one thing that could boost the Commission's credibility is essentially to make sure that it's not going to be accountable to the executive to the government that would essentially, nitpick and decide which outcomes it wants to implement after all. So that's one thing. Or at least the Commission should be empowered to oversee and monitor the implementation and not just issue recommendations, because the proclamation currently allows the Commission to just issue reports basically saying, we want the Prosperity Party-led government to do X, Y, Z, but nothing beyond that. And so one final thing, something the commissioners maybe could reflect on is, the government is one of the parties that we're concerned as being a force of interference, but it's not just the government that could interfere in the work of the Commission. So I want to highlight that, the Commission maybe could have a written pledge that it wants all, at least political stakeholders, to sign, that would commit them to honor, be bound by, and be committed to the implementation of the outcomes, whatever those outcomes are, prior to the beginning of said agenda setting. Because already we're hearing, at least for the government, public messaging that this Commission is not about power sharing, or this dialogue is not about coalition government. So it's already signaling what agendas are acceptable and whatnot. And you would hear the same from the other side. They're already signaling what agendas may be important and whatnot. But if the Commission from the very early on, as a condition to obviously this participation, require the political stakeholders to commit in a written pledge to the public that they would honor and be bound by the outcomes of the negotiation, the dialogue, no matter what they are, at least, it's not a binding mechanism legally, but it's something that the public can hold the different stakeholders accountable. So I'm just going to wrap this up at this point, but there might be more issues that come up in the Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you so
carry on with the long discussion, and it would be worth it, but time is not on our side. Can I therefore please invite Ambassador Mohammed Durir, Commissioner for the National Dialogue Commission of Ethiopia, to give his presentation. You have up to 12 minutes, Ambassador. You are still muted, Ambassador. Still muted, Ambassador. Thank you. Yes.
I am a dummy technologically. I would like, first of all, to thank the participants, the panelists, and the Chatham House for organizing this very important may I call it a dialogue or discussion on very pertinent issues regarding the Ethiopian national dialogue. Ethiopia is, to put it right, an ailing nation at this moment. An ailing nation that is hungry for democracy, that is hungry for peace and stability, and that has all the potential to uplift itself from the quagmire of disaster to fulfill the aspirations of its people. Once the national dialogue was launched, the National Dialogue Commission was launched, I was listening to communities and even individuals who know me personally, calling me from remote villages, saying that this is a very golden opportunity for Ethiopia to start talking to itself, because the healing process of Ethiopia could only start through dialogue, which is transparent, participatory, and which has a strong buy-in of the government itself. Because now that the government has established through the parliament the National Dialogue Commission, the buy-in of government does not stop there. It has to continue throughout the process and until the implementation of the recommendations that come out from the dialogue itself. There are people who believe that this is the last chance of Ethiopia. I'm not a pessimist. I have always been an optimist working on peace issues in Somalia, South Sudan, the Sudan, and I believe that, yes, it is a daunting task, it is a difficult task, but it is not impossible. There is indigenous wisdom in Ethiopia whereby we could tap into that knowledge, a pool of knowledge, by the religious leaders, by the elders, by women who have always been working on peace, on establishing, on diffusing conflicts in their own constituencies, in their own villages, and beyond. I believe that Ethiopia's peace is not only important for the country, it is also, it goes beyond that. It is important for the neighbors of Ethiopia in Djibouti, Kenya, Somalia, Somaliland, the entire Horn of Africa, and even beyond to the Greater Horn. So what we are undertaking is as equally important, if I do not exaggerate, for the region. The instability of Ethiopia, which is with a population of 100 and above, imagine if there is an exodus of refugees throughout the region. This could flood the countries in the neighborhood. It could dismantle systems in the very fragile Horn of Africa. So the importance of the national dialogue in Ethiopia has to be seen beyond the perspective of Ethiopia itself. As Ethiopians, we are the owners of this initiative. It's not imposed upon us. It's not exported to Ethiopia, sorry. It is a homegrown idea that has emanated from the desire to diffuse the tensions and end the conflicts. There are armed conflicts going in Ethiopia, and these have caused the exodus of refugees, the destruction of infrastructure, the death of thousands of people, and we are paying a very high price. Ethiopia, throughout every 25 years or 30 years, have been witnessing bloodshed. We could start from the collapse of the imperial feudal system, then into the collapse of the communist regime, and now in our nascent democracy, which has failed, we are trying to pick our pieces, and picking our pieces together and putting them in and putting our house in order is an assignment that cannot be taken by any other person except the Ethiopians themselves. That is why we believe that the national dialogue has to be credible, has to be participatory, inclusive. And when we say inclusive, we are not talking about the voices that the government wants to hear. Even the decent voices, which the government does not want to hear or to heed to, are very important for the dialogue. As equally important, if not more important, than the positive, may I put in quotations, voices. And in Ethiopia, people have all the optimism, all the desire to see a successful dialogue take place in the country. We have been talking to the elders who have given their benediction and blessing, as my colleague and friend, Dr. Adai, has eloquently put it. The blessings that we have given us a moral boost and a spiritual boost to undertake our responsibility with optimism, with responsiveness to the cause of our people. We, and I say we, the entire membership of the Commission, are on the same wavelength, on the same footing of understanding after having listened to various stakeholders. Yesterday, we have had the chance to meet the platform that brings together the opposition parties of Ethiopia. And I would like to state that there is wisdom in Ethiopia. There is the hate speech, which a parliamentarian has been talking about in this panel. But there is wisdom in Ethiopia whereby people are truly interested in having a national dialogue, not having a national dialogue for the sake of it, but seeing it succeed for the generations to come. We talk about the history of Ethiopia of 5,000 years before Christ, before Jesus Christ, and we talk about the history of Ethiopia before 3,000 years before Jesus Christ. However, in as much as this nation is an old nation, is a biblical nation, is an Abrahamic nation of various spiritual values, including indigenous spiritual faiths, yet when it comes to democracy, it is a nascent experience. It does not exceed, we can count the wins of democracy that the opportunities lost, even in my generation, as a person who has been a leftist for some time, and no more, of course, now. I am an unabashed capitalist, and I believe in the values and virtues of democracy, not the values of the past of democratic centralism or authoritarian dictatorship, as an infantile experience in our Ethiopia, which has caused bloodshed and caused thousands to fled the country. The diaspora Ethiopians who live abroad, very unfortunately, some of their mentalities are frozen in the days of the past. While they live in democratic countries, they are feeding the hate speech within the country. I'm not saying in general terms, but I am talking about certain circles, individuals. We cannot generalize. There are very sane, very patriotic, and contributive intellectuals who have been in touch with the National Dialogue Commission once it has been established, and promised to work with us on promoting peace, on promoting dialogue in our nation. As Martin Luther King said, he said, I have a dream. We say we have a dream to see an Ethiopia that is peaceful, that is progressing in terms of economic achievements, that is holding high the banner and the torch of freedom as the defiant spirit of Africa, which has defied in the past colonial domination and imperial domination. We in Ethiopia have the seeds of indigenous wisdom, which could catapult the process of the dialogue to a higher level. Our elders, both men and women, the religious personalities, and the youth are highly interested in seeing this process succeed. Since I have to talk about the aligning of the dialogue with the ongoing mediation and peace process. And I would say peace processes because there are many of them. Many of them in the sense that regarding the conflict in the north, the armed conflict in the north, and regarding squabbles and skirmishes in the southern parts of Ethiopia, in the eastern parts of Ethiopia, there are elders who have taken to themselves to diffuse these conflicts. I would like to thank the participation and engagement of the international community, and especially the African Union, in bringing about peace in Ethiopia. Ethiopia, once it picks its pieces together and puts them in order and does its homework of making the national dialogue a success, I think shall set an example to the rest of the continent and to the rest of the region. We have seen how dialogues have failed in some parts of Africa. Why? Because of the heavy-handed involvement of government. And we take it to ourselves to say yes for a buy-in, which is positive from the side of the government, but the government should not interfere in the affairs and the undertaking of the Commission to avoid the failure that has taken place in countries where government heavy-handed involvement has caused to the failure and disaster that has come after the dialogue, because people would lose hope in the very idea of a dialogue if it fails. Like in the Sudan, I have friends and very intimate friends whom I have huge respect for in the Sudan, where I have worked in the peace process with my friends and colleagues in the Ethiopian embassy and in the person of the former Ambassador Shifarau Jarsel, and with the African Union representative to bring about the constitutional document which has ended to a certain level and brought a civilian government to the forefront. Very unfortunately, that has become, very unfortunately, I repeat this word, a thing of the past now, and the Sudan is back to square one. We pray for the Sudan to succeed. In as much as I hear from my Sudanese friends, their aspirations and hopes to see the success of Ethiopia, which could contribute to the peace and stability of the neighborhood. Aligning the dialogue with the ongoing mediation is very important. One cannot replace the other, but they feed into each other. There are, I should be very frank with you, the process which is being spearheaded by the African Union, the former president of Nigeria, Chief Olusegun Obasanjo, has visited our headquarters in Addis. He has given us an insightful idea about the way forward. And with that optimism, we think that Ethiopia could overcome its problems. But we are not privy yet to the entire mediation process which is taking place. So I have these limitations to talk about that process. But in as much as I know of other mediation processes which are taking place in Afar and the Somali region, which are taking place in southern parts of Ethiopia, I believe that there is a wind of positivity, of willingness to end squabbles and conflicts, and a desire to build an Ethiopia that is democratic, that safeguards the safety and security of its own people, and sets an example for the rest of the region. However, with my optimism, I am cautiously optimistic, because in as much as there are efforts to end the conflict, there are also backfiring elements that backfire and sound to put us back to a dark cloud of inexplicable disaster. However, with my optimism and with the optimism that I see in the faces of mothers, of children, of youth, and the energy and stamina within the Commission, I believe that we can succeed in our mission. It is a very serious duty that could bring Ethiopia back on track to become the nation that all other Africans aspire to see in this nation. Ethiopia is not only important for the nations in Africa, it is also important for the entire Black race in the world. In the United States, it was Ethiopia which has kindled the movement for democracy within the United States itself through the then Orthodox Church in New York and other activisms which have been taking place on the return of the African Americans back to Africa. I do believe that with the negative baggage that we have been amassing in the past, we have to shred that. We have to unlearn that experience and nourish ourselves with the spirituality that is in all our Abrahamic religions and indigenous faiths to overcome the crises that we are facing now. There is always hope for those who believe in the Almighty Lord. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Doria, is a political analyst. You have heard his introduction and seen his biography in the chat. He will be speaking to us on ensuring inclusion in the dialogue process. Dr. Goitom, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ahmed, and thank you very much for Chatham House for the invitation. Actually, my remarks are going to be more about the limitations of what a national dialogue can do in Ethiopia's current circumstances and what sort of alternative solutions might be better to deal with our problems. So I'd like to start off by pointing out that the national dialogue is presented as the main solution for Ethiopia's current problems. Looking at statements from various international actors and also within Ethiopia, this looks like not only the main initiative, but it looks like the only initiative that's on the agenda, which means that we really need to scrutinize the nature and utility of this intervention and not simply accept its utility at face value. We should start off by asking what the purpose of the national dialogue is and what problems it can possibly address. The proclamation states that its purpose is to resolve the differences of opinions and disagreements among various political and opinion leaders and also segments of society in Ethiopia on the most fundamental national issues. And this is to be done through a broad-based, inclusive public dialogue that engenders national consensus. National consensus is an extremely ambitious objective, and I think quite laudable, but it's also quite vague, right? And important to consider that. And most of my remarks will be around that, actually. So is this national dialogue sufficient as a solution to Ethiopia's current political challenges? My view is that the problem is not only limited to the composition of the commission and the manner in which it was put together, which many commentators have drawn attention to. But I think there's a gap between what the national dialogue can deliver and what Ethiopia is facing as a challenge. And it's quite important to be mindful of that because it's presented as the solution. I would like to start off by reminding us, taking a glimpse of the current security situation in Ethiopia, the security landscape. Ethiopia is currently engulfed by a number of insurgencies, and the government's territorial control has significantly been compromised in at least 4 regional states. This is moreover a trend that has been moving in one direction over the past 2 or 3 years, rather than sort of a limited problem in time. And it seems to be continue to move in that direction. In terms of human rights abuses, we're seeing large-scale ethnic cleansing. We're seeing starvation crimes against millions of people. We've seen people burnt alive. We've seen people put into concentration camps. The humanitarian situation is dire, with 22 million people in need of emergency food aid and millions in actual famine conditions, and not just in Tigray, but in Oromia and other parts of the country as well. You all know this, of course, but I think it's important to point that out. And this should be the background against which we think about what a national dialogue can do. And I have to point out that I'm surprised that we haven't talked about this so far. These are very serious conditions, and it hasn't been mentioned so far in this discussion. And I think it has implications for the urgency of the solutions that Ethiopia needs, the stakes that we're dealing with, and therefore also the limitations of what a national dialogue can do. We're witnessing the breakdown of political order, I think, and not just mere political differences. And personally, I think that we need to do more than put together an initiative that is limited to deliberation, because that seems to be the main function of the national dialogue. By deliberation, resolve our political differences. This brings me to my second point, which is the extent to which national dialogue is a sufficient solution to Ethiopia's problems depends also on the demands that Ethiopia's political factions are making. Let's go through some of them. First of all, most opposition groups seem to be of the view that Ethiopia's political system is both autocratic and that the incumbent attain power through illegitimate elections. They also have very practical security concerns. In contemporary Ethiopia, journalists and political dissidents are regularly kidnapped, they disappear without due process and are jailed and so forth. So what these people want, the people with arms, the journalists, the tens of millions of people that are rebelling against the status quo, is they want an end to repression. They want an end to political exclusion. This is a matter of power, right? This isn't a matter of deliberation. And I think it's important to point that out. The opposition groups also use the language of national dialogue, but I think they're talking about something very different than a purely deliberative process. What they're looking for is something that results in power sharing and security guarantees. And none of this seems to be on the agenda of the current national dialogue. So it seems to me that everyone is talking about a national dialogue, but we're talking across purposes. And it's important that we are on the same page in terms of what this can deliver. I want to conclude by saying that I think the current national dialogue is not organized in a manner to deal with Ethiopia's first order problems, and they're quite urgent. To have a meaningful national dialogue, first of all, I think certain minimal requirements have to be met. We need a political atmosphere on a national level that provides the political space for people to air their political views and opinions without fear for their physical security. You can't have a national dialogue or a dialogue at gunpoint, which is really what we would have now. And there would be a great deal of self-censorship, and that would taint the one thing that a national dialogue is supposed to deliver, which is deliberation. You wouldn't actually have a genuine deliberation. So as things stand, I think these conditions cannot be expected to be created by domestic actors. In other words, I think what Ethiopia really needs is third-party mediation rather than just deliberation. Broadly or generally, I also think that a new political settlement should precede a national dialogue, or the national dialogue should be part of a component that leads to a political settlement, because that's what we're really fighting about, all of us. Everywhere, it seems, at the moment. There was some sort of alliance of some social forces that were working together until quite recently, but that broad alliance, or that alliance seems to have been falling apart now. So there are even more people that are looking for a new political settlement and an end to repression and political exclusion. So in conclusion, I'd say that the national dialogue should be postponed, I think, until the right circumstances are in place, because an illegitimate and untimely process would do immense damage, political damage to Ethiopian politics and society. A national dialogue that is used as an opportunistic tool by the incumbent would increase and fuel communal mistrust, cynicism, and mistrust of institutions. So, essentially, this would be a great waste of very scarce economic, political, and social capital, which I don't think we can afford. So important to have a critical discussion about what it can deliver and whether certain circumstances, conditions should be put in place before we proceed with this. Because I think if we fail with this effort, we might not have the political and social capital to try a second round. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
ኢትዮጵያ ኩሪ ይገባሻል ሀገሬ ኢትዮጵያ ኩሪ ይገባሻል የማያስደፍሩ ጀግና ልጅ ወልደሻል ወረደኔው አንተ መንገደኛ ልጠይቅህ ወሬ ከአባቴ ባድማ ተጠምዷል ወይ በሬ መጠመዱንማ ተጠምዶ ነበረ ደመለኛው ወይፈን ማነቂያ ሰበረ ደመን ዘራፍ አካኪ ዘራፍ አገሬ ኢትዮጵያ ጥቁርም አይደለሽ ጥቁር ነሽ አሉ ነጭም አይደለሽ ነጭ ነሽ አሉ ዘራፍ አካኪ ዘራፍ ዱብ ያለው እንደ በረዶ በልጅነቱ በረሃ ወርዶ በረሃ ዳሪ በሰው ጠመንጃ ወንዝ አሻጋሪ ሱሪ ዝቅ ጠጉር ፈተላ አሬት መጣብኝ ይወሮ በላ እዚህ ቁጭ ብሎ ደም ከሚያፈላ ስደደው አባይ ገድ ወይ ብላ ብላ ዘራፍ አካኪ ዘራፍ እያሽመሌ ባለች ቀጭነች ዘራፍ አካኪ ዘራፍ አረጃሎ ባባ አረደማን ማነው አረደኔው ሰውደኑና አረደማን ማነው አረደኔው ዘራፍ አካኪ ዘራፍ አሁንም ዘራፍ ቅድም ዘራፍ ማን ይነካታል የጀግናን በራፍ ዘራፍ ተወዶ ዘራፍ ሲታጠቅ ልቡ አይሸበር ሆዱ አይጨነቅ ከጥላት ጋር የሚደባለቅ ጠላት ሲመጣ እንደንፈርሶ ቁጭ ብሎ ቆየው 30 ጉርሶ በ30ም 30 ገሎ ገባበት ውጅም ጓንጫ ወድሮ ኧረ ካጅሬ የጠባው ጥጃ አንዱን በጥፊ አንዱን በርግጫ ሩበላተ ራበላተ እኛ እንግሊዞች ራበላተ እኛ ጣሊያኖች የቸገራቸው በጎንደር ቢሉ ማን ሊፈራቸው መይሳው አስሮ መድፍ አሰራቸው መድፉም ይገኛል ዳፋት ያለው ደብረ ታቦር ላይ ዳፋት ያለው ያነ መድፋቸው ለውርደታቸው ምስክር ነው ራበልዬ የዳጀግና አገር የዛ ሰውዬ በረጅን አልቢን ያሰኛል ወዬ ራበላተ መላው ጠፍታቸው ሲደናገሩ ለተንኮላቸው ጎጀን ይዳሉ ጎጃም ሽፈራው በላይ ሽፈራው ተቀበላቸው እየቆረጡ አባይ ጣላቸው አራይሰማ ራበላተ ዳውሮታቸው ሲደናገሩ ለተንኮላቸው ሲደናገሩ ለምጠታቸው ወሎ እንዲዳሉ ወሎስ ቢሄዱ ንጉሥ ሚካኤል ተቀበላቸው አጼ ምኒልክ የአድዋው ጀግና ከጣይቱ ጋር ጠላት የመታ ስሙ ይነሳል በሁሉም ቦታ ማለት ሴራው ይክሸፍበት ማማ የመጣብሽ አድማ እግሩ ሳር ያድርገው ጉልበቱን ቀጤማ አይሰማም ካቀባበለብሽ ብረት ከደገነ አምላክ ያግዝልሽ ላንቺ የወገነ ሴራው ይክሸፍበት የመጣብሽ አድማ እግሮ ሳር ያድርገው ጉልበቱን ቀጤማ ጸሎትሽ ይሰማ አምላክ ይለመንሽ ፈተናው አይለቅ የሚፈታተንሽ አንገትሽ ራስሽን ችሎ ለየውና ማግስቱን ይውሰደኝ 10 ሞት ይምጣና እስካለኝ እማማ ላንቺ የማይተኙ የማያንገላፉ ቁም ይበሉ እንደ ጉም ከምድረ ገጽ ይጥፉ። ኢትዮጵያ ለዘላለም ከፍ ትበል።